My cousin was spoiled his whole life. Brand new cars, private academies, everything on a silver platter. Then, at Thanksgiving, he learned I was worth $10 million and absolutely lost it in front of the entire family. My aunt shrieked, and my dad just... Can you imagine watching someone you grew up with get everything handed to them, effortlessly cruising through life while you fought for every single win? But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for the sheer, unadulterated meltdown when that entitled cousin accidentally discovered my $10 million secret at Thanksgiving dinner. What the hell happened next, you ask? Let me tell you, it was something for the history books. My name is Anastasia, and I just turned 32. Growing up, my world was, well, normal, solidly middle class in a Boston suburb. My dad was an electrical engineer, my mom a second-grade teacher. Our little 3-bedroom house with its single bathroom felt cozy, sometimes too cozy when guests arrived. My parents weren't poor, not by a long shot, but they were incredibly meticulous with money. Every penny counted. Every purchase was planned, tracked in my mom's neat budget notebook. Money doesn't grow on trees, Anastasia, Dad would say whenever I asked for something beyond the essentials. If you want something special, you work for it. That philosophy shaped everything. I remember being 8, desperately wanting a blue Schwinn bike with a white basket. For months, I did extra chores, collected recycling money, saved every birthday dollar. The pride I felt rolling home on that bike I'd earned was indescribable. My parents even matched my savings, but only after I'd made my half first. And then there were Uncle Josh and Aunt Melanie. They lived in a sprawling mansion, 6 bedrooms, pool, tennis court, a 3-car garage housing vehicles that cost more than my parents' annual salaries combined. Uncle Josh had inherited his dad's manufacturing business and just exploded its success. Their son, Jackson, was 2 years older than me, and from the moment he could walk, he was the golden child who never waited for anything. While I was saving for a $20 toy, Jackson would mention something, and poof, it would appear the next day. The contrast screamed at family gatherings. Jackson's 10th birthday? They rented out an entire indoor water park. He tore through piles of expensive toys, barely glancing at each one before moving on. The grand finale, a brand new gaming console, just released with 15 games. He managed a half-hearted thanks before getting lost in the next shiny distraction. Meanwhile, for my 8th birthday, I got a backpack, some books, and a simple digital watch. I cherished that watch, not because it was fancy, but because my parents remembered I'd mentioned wanting one 6 months earlier. My mom put it simply, "Your cousins have different values. We believe in teaching you the value of things, not just giving them to you." As kids, Jackson and I actually got along okay. We'd build forts in his basement, swim in his pool. But as we grew, that wealth gap became a chasm. By preteen years, Jackson developed this air of superiority. He'd comment on my clothes, asking why I wore the same jacket, or why my sneakers had scuff marks. He'd flaunt his latest gadgets, knowing I couldn't afford them. Dad says people who work for other people will never be truly successful. He told me once when I was 11. He says employees are just helping someone else get rich. I didn't know how to respond. My parents were both employees and they seemed happy. But his words planted this tiny, irritating seed of doubt. Sometimes the inequality really stung. In 8th grade, my old laptop died mid-project. My parents said we'd have to wait until Dad's bonus next month. That same weekend, I overheard Aunt Melanie casually mention they'd bought Jackson his second computer that year, just because he wanted better graphics for gaming. There was envy. Sure, watching him float through life without financial worries. There was confusion, wondering why life was so easy for some, so hard for others. But mostly, there was a quiet, burning determination in me. A desire to prove that hard work and perseverance could be just as valuable as having things handed to you. Little did I know those early lessons in value would sculpt the person I'd become. High school solidified the divide. I went to the local public school, Jackson went to Westfield Academy, an exclusive private school with tuition higher than some colleges. His uniform alone probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. And he never missed an opportunity to mention its prestigious alumni. My sophomore year, I got my first real job at a coffee shop, saving every penny for college. My parents were clear. They'd help, but scholarships and part-time jobs would fill the gaps. Jackson, meanwhile, turned 16 and got a brand new BMW convertible. I can still see him revving the engine in our driveway, tossing the keys. Sweet ride, right? Dad, let me pick the color. 0 miles. I nodded, doing the math. 5 years of my coffee shop salary. That same week, I'd been thrilled to find a pair of jeans on the clearance rack. "What are you driving, Anastasia?" he'd ask, knowing full well I didn't have a car. "Saving up," I replied, trying to hold my head high. "Planning to buy something reliable next year." He laughed, not cruelly, but with genuine bewilderment. "Why not just ask your parents? A sweet 16 without a car is kind of sad, don't you think?" That was Jackson's world. The idea of not being able to afford something or choosing to save was alien. If you didn't have it, you just hadn't asked. Junior year, my $1,500 Honda Civic broke down. $800 for repairs. Money I didn't have. In a moment of desperation, I swallowed my pride and called Jackson, asking to borrow some. "Sorry, that's a lot of cash," he said, sounding regretful but doing nothing. "Ask your parents, or get a credit card." That evening, his Instagram showed him at an expensive restaurant, caption, "Impromptu dinner. Why not?" The bill in the corner would have covered my repairs twice over. I ended up picking up extra shifts and borrowing from my best friend. 2 lessons learned. Never rely on Jackson, and always have an emergency fund. Our graduations were worlds apart. Mine was a simple affair at the football stadium, followed by a backyard barbecue. A modest but meaningful laptop and $500 for college. Jackson's, an ornate performing arts center, professionally printed programs, dignitaries. Afterward, a lavish party at a country club, 100 guests, live band, catering costing thousands. His gift? A brand new Range Rover with a massive red bow. He seemed pleased, but not surprised or particularly grateful. Just what he expected. "Heading to state, right?" he asked later, referring to the public university I'd attend. "Yes, partial scholarship," I said, unable to hide my pride. It was earned through countless late nights, a 4.0 GPA. Cool, he nodded absently. "I'm going to Princeton. Legacy admission, you know how it is." Dad made some calls. I didn't know how it was. My admission was grades, test scores, essays, not family connections. I just smiled and congratulated him. Summer was just as stark. I worked full-time, saving every dollar. Jackson's Instagram was a European tour, expensive music festivals, shopping sprees. He was entering adulthood with every advantage. I was preparing to work twice as hard for half the result, or so I thought. College was a grind, harder and more rewarding than I expected. My partial scholarship covered 60% of tuition, but the rest, plus housing, books, and living expenses, was on me. I worked as a research assistant, picked up weekend restaurant shifts. Brutal schedule, 5-6 hours of sleep. But I was determined to graduate debt-free. I majored in software engineering, often one of the only women in a program dominated by men. Some professors seemed skeptical. Male classmates would mansplain concepts I already understood. There were nights I cried from exhaustion and frustration, wondering if I'd chosen the right path. Jackson's college experience via social media was entirely different. Fraternity parties, weekend trips to NYC, spring breaks in the tropics. He changed majors constantly: economics, political science, art history, seemingly without a care. "Mom and Dad don't care what I study, as long as I get the Princeton degree," he explained during a rare phone call. "The connections are what matter anyway, not the classes." Then, junior year, a breakthrough. In an advanced algorithms class, Professor Amanda Martinez, one of the few female faculty members, asked me to stay after class. "You have a unique way of thinking about system architecture," she said, reviewing my work. "Consider where you want to intern." I admitted I was too focused on paying tuition for unpaid internships. She shook her head. "Let me introduce you to some former students. They started a tech company, Visu. They're looking for talented interns. It's paid, and if you impress them, it could lead to more." The next week, I interviewed with Visu, a startup building data visualization software. The founders, 3 recent grads and a veteran developer, worked out of a converted warehouse. Energy, not amenities. I got the internship on the spot, with a salary that let me cut back restaurant hours. I threw myself into it. While other interns stuck to 9 to 5, I often stayed until midnight, fascinated. The team noticed. They invited me to strategy meetings, asked for my input. By summer's end, the CEO, Michael, called me into his office. "We want you to stay part-time during the school year, and we want to offer you something else." He slid a document across the desk. "Equity. A small percentage, fractions of a point, but real ownership." "You think like an owner, not an employee," he explained. "We want to make that official. This could be worth nothing, or it could be worth something someday." I signed the paperwork that day, told no one in my family about the equity. It felt too abstract, too much like counting chickens. I just mentioned I had a good part-time job in my field, which everyone took as another example of my work ethic. During holiday breaks, I'd see Jackson, designer clothes, European labels, talking incessantly about his network. He'd settled on economics, but constantly complained about the workload, admitting he paid others to do assignments. "College is just a formality," he insisted. "Dad already has a position waiting for me at the company after graduation. Executive track from day one." I nodded, changed the subject, keeping my thoughts to myself. While he was coasting on reputation and wallet, I was building something from scratch, developing skills and relationships based on my own merit. Graduation arrived, and Visu offered me a full-time position. A fair salary, more equity options. We'd grown from 8 to nearly 30 employees, with Fortune 500 clients. We were still venture-funded, but the trajectory was promising. I accepted immediately, thrilled to build something meaningful. Little did I know that decision would lead to a financial windfall beyond anything I could imagine, and create a seismic shift in my relationship with my entitled cousin. 3 years after graduation, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael, our CEO, all-hands emergency meeting. 10 minutes. Main conference room. My stomach dropped. Emergency meetings in startup culture mean one of 2 things: shutting down or something monumental. Given our recent struggles for funding, I feared the worst. I hurried to the conference room, tension thick in the air. Michael walked in, followed by our executive team, expressions I couldn't read. "I'll cut straight to the point," Michael said, his voice wavering slightly. 30 minutes ago, we signed the final papers. Data Corp has acquired Visu for $200 million. The room erupted. Hugging, crying, high-fiving. My mind went blank. What did this mean? Later that afternoon, after hours of champagne and briefings, an email arrived. Equity calculation. As an early employee with accumulated options, my stake was just over 5%. The acquisition translated to $10.2 million for me before taxes. I stared at the number, unable to comprehend. 5 years earlier, I was working double shifts for textbooks. Now, at 27, I was a multimillionaire. In the days that followed, I met with financial advisors. I paid off my student loans, bought a modest, comfortable condo in a neighborhood I'd only dreamed of, and set aside funds for my parents' retirement. Beyond that few immediate changes, what I didn't do was tell anyone, except my parents. We agreed to keep the exact amount private, even from extended family. I continued working at the acquired company, taking a leadership role in the integration team, with a comfortable but not ostentatious salary. "There's no reason everyone needs to know your financial situation," my father advised. "Money changes how people see you, sometimes in ways you wouldn't expect." His words were prescient, though not as either of us expected. Around the same time, Jackson had graduated from Princeton with mediocre grades, but an impressive social network. Despite his advantages, he struggled to find meaningful employment. After several half-hearted attempts at entry-level jobs, he quit, deeming them beneath his potential. He landed at his father's company. An ambiguous role, strategic development associate. From family gossip, it involved little actual responsibility, but came with a generous salary, company car, and expense account. Uncle Josh hoped his son would grow into a legitimate role. Evidence remained elusive. During a rare phone call, Aunt Melanie expressed frustration bordering on embarrassment. "We've given him every advantage," she lamented. "Best schools, connections, opportunities. I don't understand why he's struggling when other young people seem to manage just fine." There was a pointed quality to her comment, a clear comparison to me unspoken. I had to restrain myself from pointing out that maybe those advantages had actually disadvantaged Jackson, stripping him of the resilience and work ethic needed for genuine achievement. I just murmured sympathetic noises and changed the subject. I'd learned that discussing our differences only led to tension. Aunt Melanie and Uncle Josh remained convinced their parenting was superior, despite all evidence. As the years passed, my investments grew. My career advanced through genuine accomplishment, not nepotism. I found the work engaging, the compensation more than adequate, and the added satisfaction of knowing my bank account held a cushion most people couldn't imagine. The most significant change wasn't material but psychological. Financial security freed me to make decisions based on what mattered, not economic necessity. I could take professional risks, volunteer, help friends, without worrying about my own stability. Meanwhile, Jackson's Instagram told a story of someone desperately maintaining an appearance of success, contributing little of value. Photos of business lunches, networking events, motivational captions about hustling, all designed to convince others and himself he was building something. The collision of our paths was inevitable, but I never anticipated how dramatic it would be, or that a family Thanksgiving dinner would permanently alter our family dynamics, forcing a long overdue reckoning with privilege without purpose. The invitation arrived via text. Crisp October morning. "Uncle Josh," though I suspected Aunt Melanie dictated it. My stomach nodded. I hadn't been to their Thanksgiving in 3 years. I'd made excuses. The thought of an entire evening listening to Jackson boast about imaginary accomplishments, Aunt Melanie making subtle jabs about my modest lifestyle, made me want to send another polite refusal. But something stopped me. Maybe it was time to stop avoiding them. I had nothing to prove. Maybe my perspective had shifted enough that their performative wealth wouldn't bother me anymore. After a moment, I replied, "I'll be there. Thanks for the invitation." That evening, I called my parents. My mother sounded apprehensive. "Are you sure, sweetheart? The last time was uncomfortable." She was referring to a Christmas dinner 2 years prior, when Jackson spent the evening describing his executive role, making pointed remarks about people who lack ambition, while glancing pointedly at me. My dad had almost lost his temper defending me. "I think I'm in a different place now," I assured her. "Their opinions don't affect me the way they used to. Besides, it might be nice for us all to be together." What I didn't mention was a small, petty part of me that wanted to observe Jackson's inflated sense of importance, now that I secretly had more financial security than he ever would. Not that I'd reveal it, but knowing it gave me a certain immunity to his posturing. As Thanksgiving approached, I found myself oddly preoccupied with a host gift. Previous years, it was a modest bottle of wine or homemade dessert, accepted with faint condescension. This year, I could buy something impressive, but that felt like playing into their materialistic values. After much thought, I settled on a balance. A limited edition bottle of bourbon Uncle Josh had once admired, plus a handwritten card expressing genuine gratitude. It was neither ostentatious nor inadequate, a small reflection of my evolving relationship with money. The week before, I had dinner with David, an old college friend who is now a successful financial advisor. He was one of the few who knew about my windfall. "So, you're voluntarily spending Thanksgiving with the people who've condescended to you your entire life?" he asked incredulously. "That's either very enlightened or completely masochistic." I laughed. Maybe a bit of both. I've been avoiding them for years. It's time to stop giving them that power. Besides, my parents will be there. David nodded. "Just promise me one thing. If Jackson starts his usual routine about being self-made, while bragging about his parents funding his entire existence, you'll at least consider dropping the tiniest hint about your actual net worth. The look on his face would be worth the family drama." "That's exactly what I'm not going to do," I insisted, though I couldn't help smiling at the image. "The whole point is, I don't need external validation anymore, especially not from people whose values I don't share." "Very mature," David conceded, "but my offer stands. I'd even crash Thanksgiving dessert as your fake financial advisor with an urgent matter regarding your 8-figure portfolio if you give me the signal." Thanksgiving morning, I woke early, chose a simple, elegant outfit, quiet confidence, no obvious labels. The contradiction wasn't lost on me, caring about my appearance for people I claimed not to need approval from, but I rationalized it as armor. The 45-minute drive to Uncle Josh and Aunt Melanie's suburban mansion. Each mile the tension grew. Their house, imposing and perfectly maintained, holiday decorations, a circular driveway filled with luxury vehicles, including what I assumed was Jackson's gleaming black Tesla. I took a deep breath, gathered the bourbon, a bouquet of flowers, and my resolve. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open. Aunt Melanie, impeccably dressed. "Anastasia, darling, you made it!" she exclaimed with manufactured enthusiasm, air-kissing my cheeks. "Far too long. Come in, come in. Everyone's in the great room." I followed her through the marble foyer. My parents spotted me. Dad raising his glass, Mom coming to embrace me, and then Jackson, holding court near the fireplace, gesturing grandly to our younger cousins. He'd gained weight, his expensive suit strained, face fuller, hair thinning despite being only 34. When he saw me, a momentary flash of something, insecurity maybe, quickly masked by his usual bravado. Well, the prodigal cousin returns," he called out, making sure everyone heard. I was beginning to think you were avoiding us, Anastasia." I smiled, pleasantly, determined not to let him set the tone. "Hello, Jackson. Good to see you two. Happy Thanksgiving." I had no way of knowing then that this forced pleasantry would be among the last civil words exchanged between us that evening, or that in a few short hours the carefully maintained facade of family harmony would shatter beyond repair. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a space so infrequently used it felt like a stage set. Heirloom china, sterling silver, crystal glasses catching the light from the ostentatious chandelier. Place cards dictated seating. I was between my mother and Uncle Josh's sister, Margaret, with Jackson directly across. A deliberate orchestration, it felt, for maximum comparison. My parents exchanged a knowing glance. My dad gave me a subtle wink. Initially, conversation flowed. We discussed the mild weather, recent films, mild family gossip. I actually started to think maybe I'd overestimated the potential for discomfort. Maybe we'd have a peaceful holiday meal. That illusion shattered when Uncle Josh raised his glass. "Before we officially begin, I'd like to recognize some exciting developments. As many of you know, Jackson has recently been promoted to Director of Strategic Initiatives at J&M Manufacturing." A murmur of congratulations. I maintained my polite smile, though I knew from industry contacts that Director of Strategic Initiatives was exactly the kind of vague title invented for people with connections, not qualifications. Furthermore, Uncle Josh continued. He's spearheading our expansion into the Asian market with a new product line he conceptualized himself. Jackson beamed, nodding at the admiring comments. My father caught my eye, his expression carefully neutral, but his thoughts were transparent. We both knew J&M had been trying to enter the Asian market for years, and any new initiative was likely the work of the actual executive team. Anastasia! Aunt Melanie turned to me, exaggerated interest in her voice. How are things at your little tech company? Still enjoying the 9-to-5 world? Before I could respond, Jackson interjected. Don't be modest, Aunt Melanie. I'm sure Anastasia's role is very important. What was the title again, cousin? Senior developer? Project coordinator. I'm the integration team lead, I replied evenly. After our acquisition, I've been managing how our technology is implemented within the parent company's existing systems. Acquisition. Uncle Josh perked up, business interest momentarily overriding family politics. I hadn't heard about that. Who bought your startup? Data Corp acquired us last year, I said, deliberately downplaying its significance. It's been a positive transition overall. Jackson's expression flickered. Recognition of Data Corp's industry, standing registered. Then he regained his composure. Well, that must be nice. Having a stable corporate parent. Much less stressful than real entrepreneurship, I imagine. I chose not to point out he'd never entrepreneured anything in his life, instead taking a bite of turkey and complimenting Aunt Melanie on the meal. The conversation shifted, but throughout dinner, Jackson repeatedly steered it back to his supposed business acumen, describing vague meetings with key Asian investors and revolutionary product developments. My parents maintained polite interest. I occasionally caught my father suppressing signs of exasperation. The pivotal moment arrived during dessert. My phone buzzed. An email notification. I intended to ignore it until I saw it was from David, subject line. Urgent. Investment opportunity. Closing tonight. Given his knowledge of my Thanksgiving plans, I suspected it was genuinely time-sensitive, not his promised joke. Excuse me, I said, standing. I need to take care of a quick work matter. Everything looks delicious. I'll be right back. I stepped into the adjacent study for privacy, quickly scanning David's email about a limited investment in a promising green tech startup. Terms looked favorable. It aligned with my interest in sustainable investments. I replied, confirming my interest in allocating $2 million from my diversified portfolio, adding a postscript asking how his own Thanksgiving was progressing. As I pressed send, I became aware of someone entering the room. Turning, I found Jackson standing uncomfortably close, 2 snifters of expensive brandy in his hands. Thought you might want something to sip while you handle your critical emergency, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Can't let the corporate overlords enjoy their holiday without checking in, right? Thanks, I said, accepting the brandy, slipping my phone into my pocket. It wasn't work, actually, just a time-sensitive investment matter. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Investment? Like a 401k adjustment or something. The condescension in his voice triggered a rare moment of competitiveness in me. No, a private equity opportunity in the sustainable tech sector. Private equity? He laughed, as if I'd told an amusing joke. Those typically require minimum buy-ins of at least $100,000. What are you doing, pooling resources with friends? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again with David's reply. Jackson's eyes flicked down to where the notification illuminated my pocket. The preview text was clearly visible, confirmed for $2 million. We'll execute tonight. Happy Thanksgiving to you too, fellow millionaire. There was a moment of absolute stillness. Jackson processed what he'd just seen. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then something darker. A mixture of jealousy and anger I had never witnessed before. $2 million, he finally sputtered, his voice rising. What kind of game are you playing, Anastasia? I'm not playing any game, I replied, suddenly aware we were creating a scene that could be heard from the dining room. It's a private matter, Jackson. Let's rejoin the others. But Jackson wasn't letting this go. He blocked my path to the door, his face flushing red beneath his designer stubble. No, no, no. You don't get to drop something like that and walk away. Are you trying to tell me you have $2 million to invest in some random startup? That's more than most people's entire net worth. Jackson, please lower your voice, I urged, hearing the conversation in the dining room falter. This isn't the time or place. Oh, I think it's exactly the time and place, he countered, following me as I tried to move around him. All these years, looking down on my family, judging our lifestyle, acting so superior with your work ethic and modest living. And meanwhile, you're what? Secretly rich? Is this some kind of trust fund you've been hiding? We re-entered the dining room to find all eyes fixed on us, dessert forks suspended in midair. Is everything all right? Aunt Melanie asked, her practiced hostess smile strained. Ask Anastasia. Jackson replied before I could speak. Apparently, my cousin, the humble employee, is throwing around millions of dollars in investments. When were you planning to share that little detail with the family? A stunned silence descended. My parents exchanged alarmed glances, clearly unprepared. Jackson, that's enough, my father said firmly. Anastasia's financial situation is her private business. Private business? Jackson's voice rose further, brandy sloshing over the rim of his forgotten snifter. That's rich coming from you, Uncle David. All these years acting like we're the materialistic ones for providing our son with advantages. Meanwhile, your daughter is sitting on some secret fortune. What kind of hypocritical game is this family playing? It's not a game, I said, finding my voice despite the chaos. The startup I worked for was acquired last year. My equity stake translated to approximately $10 million. I chose not to broadcast that information because it doesn't define who I am. The number landed like a physical blow. Jackson actually staggered, his face contorting in disbelief and outrage. Aunt Melanie gasped audibly, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. $10 million. Jackson repeated, each word dripping with accusation. You're worth $10 million, and you've been pretending to be just a regular employee this whole time? Driving that modest car, living in that ordinary condo, acting like butter wouldn't melt in your mouth. I haven't been pretending anything, I countered, struggling to maintain composure. I continued working because I find the work meaningful. I live within comfortable means because excessive luxury doesn't interest me. Not everyone measures their worth by their possessions, Jackson. That was the breaking point. With a roar of frustration that seemed to emanate from somewhere primal, Jackson swept his arm across the table, sending crystal glasses, fine china, and the remainder of Aunt Melanie's pumpkin pie crashing to the floor. How dare you? He shouted, years of insecurity erupting at once. How dare you judge me and my family when you've been secretly wealthy this whole time? At least we're honest about who we are. Aunt Melanie burst into tears, not over her shattered dishware, but from the revelation itself. It's not fair, she wailed, turning accusingly toward my father. You always made us feel terrible for giving Jackson advantages, for wanting him to have the best things. And all this time, your daughter was accumulating a fortune in secret. My father, normally the most even-keeled person I knew, stood slowly, his voice deadly calm. Melanie, what's not fair is your fundamental misunderstanding of what we taught our daughter. Anastasia earned every penny of that money through hard work, intelligence, and character, qualities we prioritized over material possessions. The fact that you and Jackson immediately assumed there must have been some deception involved speaks volumes about your values, not ours. The room fell silent, save for Aunt Melanie's sobbing and Jackson's ragged breathing. I have worked for everything I have, I said quietly, addressing not just Jackson, but the entire stunned family. Every opportunity, every achievement, every dollar. No one handed me anything. For years, I've listened to you belittle my choices, imply that I lacked ambition or success because I didn't flaunt wealth or status. I never corrected those assumptions because I don't measure my worth by your standards, and I'm not going to start now. I picked up my purse and coat, suddenly exhausted by the entire charade. Thank you for dinner. I think it's best if I leave now. As I walked toward the door, I paused, placing the bottle of bourbon on the side table, still neatly wrapped. It felt like a peace offering, now rendered meaningless by the chasm of understanding that had finally, irrevocably revealed itself. Behind me, I could hear Jackson ranting, his voice cracking. She thinks she's so much better than everyone, little Miss Perfect with her secret millions, while the rest of us are just shallow materialists in her eyes. The last thing I heard as I closed the front door was Aunt Melanie's shrill accusation at my parents. This is your fault. You raised her to judge us. The cold November air hit my face like a welcome slap, clearing the emotional fog. My hands shook as I fumbled with my car keys. What had just happened felt momentous, a collision of worldviews decades in the making, erupting with a force that destroyed more than just Thanksgiving dinner. The drive home was a blur. Streetlights streaked past, distorted by tears I hadn't realized were falling. By the time I pulled into my condo's garage, a hollow emptiness had settled in my chest, replacing the anger. I wasn't upset about the revelation of my financial situation. It was bound to come out. And frankly, there was a certain relief in having it known. What devastated me was the realization that my family, the people who had known me my entire life, could so quickly reduce me to nothing more than a dollar figure, could assume deception rather than achievement, could twist something I had earned through years of dedication into something that somehow made me the villain of our family narrative. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my heels, collapsing onto the couch, not bothering with lights. The darkness matched my mood. I replayed the evening, wondering if I could have handled things differently. Should I have disclosed my windfall immediately? Would that have prevented tonight's explosion, or merely spread the inevitable drama over a longer period? My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from my parents, checking I'd made it home safely, expressing their dismay. I sent brief reassurances, but couldn't muster the energy for a real conversation. Tomorrow would be soon enough. Just as I was about to silence my phone for the night, it rang. An unexpected caller, Uncle Josh. My finger hesitated. Finally, I answered. Anastasia. His voice sounded strained, older somehow. I wanted to call, and, well, I'm not exactly sure what to say, except that I'm sorry for how tonight unfolded. The apology surprised me. Uncle Josh had always been affable, but distant, concerned more with appearances than genuine connection. This vulnerability was unfamiliar. It was an unfortunate situation all around, I replied neutrally, unwilling to accept blame, but not wanting to escalate. Melanie is... He paused, searching for words. She's upset. She's always been sensitive about comparisons between our families, about parenting approaches. Finding out about your success triggered something in her. And Jackson, I couldn't help asking. A heavy sigh. Jackson is Jackson. He's never handled perceived slights well. But that's partly our fault, isn't it? We never taught him to process disappointment or measure himself by his own standards, rather than others. The admission was so unexpected that, for a moment, I couldn't respond. In all our years, I'd never heard my uncle acknowledge a shortcoming in how they'd raised their son. I appreciate the call, I finally said. I think everyone needs some space right now. Perhaps after the holidays we can try again with clearer understanding. Perhaps, he agreed, though neither of us sounded convinced. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Anastasia. Truly. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness for a long time, turning over his words, searching for the sincerity I wanted to believe was there. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house for a debrief. Equal parts emotional processing and strategic planning for future family interactions. My mother made strong coffee while my father paced, still agitated. "The nerve," he muttered for perhaps the 10th time, as if teaching you the value of hard work and character was some sort of crime against Jackson. "David," my mother interjected gently, "we've established that Melanie's perspective is distorted. Repeating it doesn't help anyone, least of all Anastasia." I sipped my coffee, finding comfort in their unwavering support. What happens now? Are we just supposed to pretend nothing happened the next time we see them? My father snorted dismissively, but my mother considered the question seriously. "I think time will determine that. Families have weathered worse storms, but regardless of what they choose to do, you have nothing to apologize for. Your success is earned, and your choices about how to handle that success reflect values we're proud to have instilled." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "The real question is what you want moving forward. Do you want a relationship with that part of the family? On what terms?" It was a question I couldn't immediately answer, but one that would guide my reflections in the months that followed. 3 months after the Thanksgiving disaster, I received a surprising text from Aunt Melanie. "Jackson started new job today, not at family business. Entry level at marketing firm downtown. His choice. Thought you might like to know." The message, devoid of her usual emotional manipulation or passive aggression, felt like an olive branch. I responded with simple encouragement. That's a big step. Wishing him well. Through the family grapevine, I learned more. After the Thanksgiving revelation, Jackson had apparently gone through an identity crisis, culminating in a decision to try building a career without his father's connections or financial support. It was the first job he'd ever gotten entirely on his own merits. And despite the entry-level position being a significant step down from his fabricated executive role, there was word he was actually applying himself with unexpected diligence. Meanwhile, I had been doing some soul-searching of my own. The financial security that had once seemed like a private victory now felt like it carried responsibility. After consultations with financial advisors and considerable thought, I established a scholarship fund for first-generation college students studying technology fields, specifically those working while pursuing their education. The initial endowment was $2 million, enough to support 10 students annually with tuition and stipends. I named it after my parents, honoring the values they had instilled in me, rather than seeking personal recognition. When the local paper ran a small piece about the new scholarship, I sent the clipping to my extended family without comment. It wasn't about proving anything to them, but rather about demonstrating through actions, not words, what wealth meant to me, an opportunity to create opportunity for others. A full year passed before I saw Jackson again. It was at a cousin's wedding, a neutral territory where family politics were temporarily suspended for celebration. He approached me during the reception, noticeably thinner than at Thanksgiving. His designer suit replaced by something more modest, but better fitting. "Hey," he said, awkwardly extending his hand. "It's been a while." I shook it, searching his face for signs of the hostility that had defined our last encounter. Instead, I found something unexpected: humility. "I hear you've been making changes," I offered, giving him an opening. He nodded, glancing down at his seltzer water rather than the champagne others carried. "Turns out starting over is harder than starting from scratch." "Who knew?" "Everyone who's ever had to do it," I replied, but without malice. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair enough. Listen, I'm not good at this kind of thing, but I owe you an apology. What I said at Thanksgiving, how I behaved, it wasn't about you. It was never really about you." "I know," I said simply. "The scholarship thing," he continued, that was really something. Mom showed me the article. It made me think about what I would do if I suddenly had that kind of money. And I realized I had no idea beyond buying stuff I didn't need. That was a wake-up call. We talked for nearly an hour, not about money or success or the past, but about the challenges of figuring out who you are when all the external markers you've relied on are stripped away. For perhaps the first time in our lives, we spoke as equals, each acknowledging our own struggles and growth, without comparison or judgment. As the years have passed, my relationship with wealth has evolved. I've learned that money itself is neutral, neither inherently corrupting nor ennobling. What matters is the relationship we choose to have with it, the values that guide our decisions about earning, spending, saving, and sharing. The jealousy I once felt watching Jackson get handed everything now seems like wasted energy. In truth, I was given something far more valuable than material advantages. I was given the chance to discover my own strength, to build confidence through achievement rather than acquisition, to find satisfaction in effort rather than entitlement. And Jackson? He's still figuring things out, still untangling the complicated legacy of privilege without purpose. We're not close, but there's a mutual respect that was impossible before. Sometimes the greatest gifts require the most painful unwrapping. The $10 million changed my life, but not in the ways most people might expect. The true freedom it provided wasn't freedom from work or worry, but freedom from external validation, from the need to prove my worth through possessions or titles, or the approval of others who measure success by different standards. True wealth, I've discovered, isn't about what you have, but what you value. It's about building a life aligned with your deepest principles, rather than others' expectations. It's about recognizing that being handed everything often means developing nothing within yourself, while earning your way means becoming someone who can never be diminished by circumstance or others' opinions. If you've ever felt like the underdog in your family or watched others get opportunities you had to fight for, remember that the struggles that seem unfair are often the very experiences developing your most valuable qualities. The things we work hardest for become the foundations we can never lose. So, I have to ask you, what do you think about entitlement versus earning your way? Have you ever dealt with family dynamics like this, where money or privilege created such a deep divide? I'm honestly so curious to hear your experiences and thoughts in the comments below.